beat Hard Reset Redux. I haven't played it much myself, so I'll have to defer to you on a lot of the qualities of the game, but from what little I've seen, it seems like if Duke Nukem fell into Blade Runner and started shooting all the TVs.
I like that. It is over the top, old school, quote unquote shooter, and it's okay. It's about as okay as a shooter gets, actually. I had a good deal of fun in chunks, but it also seemed kind of bland. I don't know. You started it, right? Like you just did like the first couple of levels or something.
Yeah, I mean, from what you've told me, it seems like the 2 levels that I played are kind of a micro representation of the entire experience, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's one of the things that made it so okay by the end, is as fun as the base mechanics can be, because the shooting's fine. Like you aim, you shoot, and it works, so that's fine. But the levels are so samey. Like from the very beginning, you're in a Blade Runner-esque environment, which is cool. I love being in a Blade Runner-esque environment. I like that idea. But it's so unfortunate thing about Blade Runner is it's so dark, and it's very easy to make everything look the same when it's that dark all the damn time. And yeah, you have neon things popping up, but there's not enough of them. And it's really just a lot of alleyways and streets. You're just kind of walking between buildings. And you go into a building and it's dark again, and there's little rafters. And it was just kind of... the levels, honestly, in my memory, kind of blend together. And it does not help that the level design was also fairly linear. And I don't mean linear, like, it's not as linear as, like, a Call of Duty or something. You're not literally just running forward. But you are, in essence, running forward because, for 2 reasons. One is all of the secrets are just little pockets that diverge from the main direction that you need to go. So you kind of go off the beaten path a little bit, but then you're always going to come back to the beaten path and just keep going.
Right.
And every time you need to go somewhere, there's a clear indication of where you're directed as clear as possible, because there's an electrical line. Like there'll be a door that's blocked, and you need to find a way to open the door, and the way you find the way to open it is you follow the electrical line to the generator that keeps the door locked. And you do that the entire game, the whole time, from start to finish.
You're just following these like big glowing blue lines.
Yeah, and you're following them through dark alleyways and streets. It does change a bit by the second half of the game, visually at least. Not in terms of level design. The level design stays pretty much the same. But by the second half of the game, the sun comes out. And so that's nice. And you do end up you're not on the street anymore. But by that point, I was already getting tired of the game. I should probably say something more positive, because I actually didn't. I'm probably making it sound like I disliked it a lot more than I did. It was fun. I had to play it in chunks. It's a short game. I think I could have finished it in one sitting if I really wanted to. But I could only stand maybe 2 to 3 levels at a time, and then I had to take a break, because it would be fun the first 30 minutes, and then the last portion of that, I kind of got tired of it. And it happened every time. Every time I sat down, I was like, okay, finally I'm going to go through this whole damn game, and then I would get bored a little bit halfway through.
Did you find that the enemy encounters were particularly challenging as you went along?
They seemed like they were supposed to. The way that they introduce the enemies, as you get further along, they introduce these new enemies who have bigger health, and they do more damage. But that was kind of the extent of it. Like, there wasn't actually a lot of variety in terms of how the enemies attack you. They all kind of attacked you exactly the same way. There's not a lot of verticality going on. So you have like, for example, you have this enemy from the beginning of the game who shoots like rockets at you, and then later on you just get a stronger, like a literally more armor version of that one that just shoots more rockets. And so, and by that point you have more weapons and your weapons are stronger. So it kind of feels the same. It doesn't feel that much more challenging. I do think the challenge was well balanced. I died a couple of times during the game. But I also didn't think that the combat was enticing enough that I would want to raise the difficulty and try it again, because it wasn't skill based enough. Right? It had a dash mechanic, which I actually really liked. I liked that you can dodge around bullets really quickly. But that was the extent, really. Like the weapons that you're switching between, you have 2 main weapons, and both main weapons have 5 variations each. Right. But unfortunately, as cool as that could have been, in terms of having a whole wide variety of weaponry, it ended up giving you a lot of the same weapons for both of them. A lot of the same variations, I should say, for both of them. So, for example, both weapons had a grenade launcher type. Both weapons had a machine gun type. Both weapons had like a type of ammunition that paralyzes. They both had kind of the same thing. So it was really just up to you which one you're in the mood to use. It wasn't really a necessity to switch, as much as I really hoped and thought that it would be.
And what are the differences between the weapons? Because it seems like one of them fires regular bullets and the other one fires like energy or something.
Yeah, so there's 2. This is actually a nice idea. I like this idea. There's only 2 ammo types. There is the regular bullet ammunition type, and then there's this electrical Tesla coil type ammunition. So you only need to collect ammunition for those 2, which actually makes it really nice because you always have ammunition. It's a very easy way to manage ammunition. You always have enough. And so that was a really great idea, and it should have worked out really well if you had really unique weapons for both. But they ended up being so similar that it's kind of like, well, might as well just give me more ammunition for the same ammunition type. Why even switch if they're not going to be that different? Some of the critique for Hard Reset that I have is also just the old school shooter idea. Like the idea of this is what an old school shooter is like, because having grown up playing Duke Nukem and Doom and Blood and all those old school shooters, I don't think they were like this, honestly. Like, because the way that some of these games like Hard Reset, or I think of the recent Shadow Warrior remake, or even Serious Sam or something, as I like those games. I actually really like Serious Sam, but it's not the same as like an old school Doom, and it's not the same as an old school Duke Nukem or something, because the thing that made those games so interesting, first off, the weaponry mattered. In like the original Doom, you're switching weapons because there's always a better weapon for a certain enemy type, and it forced you to keep switching it up. Right? This one, so long as you shoot a lot, you're gonna kill the enemy. It doesn't really matter. You don't have to change weaponry, and that's a shame. And it really it ruins the moment to moment. I think it makes it quite a bit more mundane. And also the level design in old school shooters was way more prominent. In old school shooters, you had to pay attention to the level, and the levels were really half of the fun. The enemies in the level was awesome, and it was great, and it was kind of like exciting. But it was really a puzzle and a really enjoyable maze to figure out how to get through those levels. And this one does not have that. And what it does have is waves of enemies every once in a while, and that's not fun. Like the whole wave mechanic of like, oh, old school shooters have waves of enemies, I think it's a misunderstanding of how they function, because in like Doom, and I'm thinking specifically the original Doom, you had rooms where the enemies would appear, but it was limited to like 5 or 6. And you would have moments where you would enter a room and there would be a bunch of enemies. But that was like a culmination of having explored and gotten lost and like figured out all these puzzles. And also, you don't have to do that room. You don't have to kill the enemies in that room to progress. Whereas these games like Hard Reset or the Serious Sam ones or Shadow Warrior remake, they have this idea of you have to beat this wave of enemies in order to move on. And what it ends up feeling like is you going from corridor to corridor, then a big room, kill a wave of enemies, corridor, big room, corridor, big room, with tiny pockets of deviations. And that is not what old school shooters were like. And a testament to the new Doom is the new Doom seems to kind of understand that. Even though the new Doom does have waves, it does actually have like literal arena style waves. First off, they make the arena combat so much more interesting. Like the fluidity of movement is so much more vertical and moment to moment really exciting. but also the level design is once again maze-like, and you're paying attention to the environment, and you really remember. I remember whole sections of that game, and it's been quite a few weeks since I played it. But Hard Reset is it's one of those things. It's like aiming to be an old school shooter, but it kind of feels a little like, to me, it feels a little like a misnomer. Like you're not categorizing it right.
It seems like the concept of an old school shooter doesn't really succeed if it doesn't have those interesting enemy types.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you don't have enemy types that require you to prioritize them, then you're just going in and shooting the nearest enemy, and then the next nearest enemy, and then until you're done.
Yeah, and some of this is like, it's old school shooter. I guess it's literally the same as an old school shooter in terms of like there's a lot of enemies and you don't have to aim down the sights. All these kind of like basic things, but the design, the spirit of the design is very different. And so it really doesn't feel the same. It's sort of like when a movie comes out that remakes a classic and they just try to do the same thing as a classic, but they missed the idea of the only reason that old movie was a classic was because it was fresh and because it was something different. And so if you're not going to do something fresh and different, then it's not going to feel the same. And so this one, it's like, it's not going to feel like an old school shooter because it's not actually capturing the essence of what made that work. It's just kind of trying to do the same thing. And it bums me out. And this, okay, but this game is not bad. I don't, I feel like
sounds bad.
I feel like I'm really. It's so much easier to be negative, and I feel so bad because I really don't want to be negative over here.
What's your favorite? What's your absolute?
Okay,
favorite
so what does work? I did say I do like the Blade Runner. I like that it looks like Blade Runner. I think Blade Runner is a cool aesthetic, and I think it could be used really well. I like that all the enemies are machines. I think they make for just an interesting enemy type to shoot. Seeing all those little shards fly everywhere and the little machines break apart, I think that's really cool.
Even the environments, how destructible they are, is kind of fun.
Yeah, you're blowing up walls and things, and yeah, there's constantly things blowing up and shrapnel flying everywhere. And it is exciting. I say that it's fun in small chunks because those small chunks that you're playing are super fun. It relieves. It's kind of like, in essence, relieving a lot of your stress, and I think it pulls that off well enough. It's as linear as it is. It does at least have good pacing. I do think that there's a good amount of time of sort of figuring out, okay, where does this chord lead? How do I get to the next room? And then, but you know, like there's good space between the battles, and I think that's smart. I'm glad that they don't always have enemies rushing at you, because that actually would get annoying. They do give you a little bit of space. By the end of the game, I do think that the end does, not the end, but I do think the last couple of areas do feel kind of exciting. Just because they do look so different than the rest of the game. They finally add like a good bit of variety. And so that's actually a nice little payoff. It does kind of feel like they knew that they needed to have something different before the end of the game, and that's really cool. The story is pretty forgettable, though. I did find myself kind of like, I was reading this. It's like a comic book style story. I was just kind of watching it, and it's really not important, but that's okay. I wouldn't hold that against the game. It is a shooter. It's an old school shooter. The story doesn't really have anything to do with anything, but it's totally, you could just throw that story away and the game would have been the same. It is super fun. I only paid $3 for it because I own Shadow Warrior already, and if you own Shadow Warrior, you can get it for $3. At least when I got it. I don't know if that deal is still available. And I got it off Steam. So if you are out there and you see this game available for $3, it is most definitely worth $3. I got way more than $3 of enjoyment out of it. That was a lot of fun. I would think, though, that anything above like $25, it would start to not maybe live up to that. And obviously we're referring to it in a product sort of way, but the entertainment value, I don't think, it's not a very long game, and there's not enough variety even in that short game to really make it feel meaningful. Honestly, I do think that if you want this type of shooter experience, as cool as the effort of Hard Reset Redux is, I think you're better off just playing an old school shooter, an actual one. Like, just get Doom and mod it, and get some nicer graphics or something,
Yeah.
or play Quake or something. There's way more interesting level variety in that, and the combat's a lot more exciting. I know that this is a redux of the original Hard Reset, which I played when it first came out a little bit, but I don't notice a difference too much. Like, my memory of playing it when it first came out, it really seems the same in my head. So they claim that they balance the enemies better and that they improve the graphics and stuff. If that's true, that's great. But we're reviewing it. I'm reviewing it blind. I don't know enough about the original to be able to say if the Redux is like substantially better. It seems fine though. As a game, it holds up fine enough on its own. It's a decent game. It has a lot of flaws. I think some of the design elements is missing the spirit of an old school shooter. But if you do want something that just scratches an itch, like if you want to just shoot waves of enemies, if you just finished playing the new Doom and you want a more modern, like you want another old school shooter but you want it more modern and then an actual old school shooter, then yeah, Hard Reset will give you a nice day or two of gameplay. But it's a hard sell. I do think there's better games that are already out there.
It's really hard to justify this game after Doom 4 came out, because it is everything that this game is aiming at.
Yeah, it sucks. The timing's a little. Well, I mean, actually, maybe on their end the timing's good because it's like people might be in the mood for that, I guess. But yeah, Doom 4 is such. Yeah, I would just replay Doom 4, honestly, if you can get it to work. Just do that. But yeah, I think that's it. Thanks for listening. The game's okay. Honestly, this is about if we gave scores, this would be a 5 if there ever was one. 5 out of 10. Not that we do give scores. So that's not a score. I don't want people to think. All right.
Would be.
Yeah. Thanks for listening.
Thank you.
Bye bye.